Hello everybody, this is BladeCrossEXE, and today we're going to answer a question that has puzzled the MegaMan Battle Network fandom for well over 10 years at this point. What actually would happen to Lan and Sean following the events of the battle at Gospel HQ? We know that the radiation levels in the apartment got to such high levels that both of them literally blacked out from exposure, and we've heard people toss around some numbers and speculate on how badly they will both be damaged. But today I brought a friend who is a bit more knowledgeable on the subject to actually give us an idea of how things would actually go in the real world. You want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hey there, I'm Sam. I'm studying to be a radiation therapist. So I work with a lot of radiation energies and stuff like that. So I've been studying radiation physics and the effects it has on biology for a little over a year now. So I can hopefully answer these questions for you all.
And coincidentally, he also just happens to be a fan of this series. So when I presented this question to him, he knew exactly what I was talking about. So let's get into the nitty-gritty today. Well, the numbers that were given in the game are inexact as far as the high amounts of radiation exposure go, but the numbers they keep tossing around are increments of 50,000 times higher than normal levels, and it is stated, at least in the English version of the game, that it's electromagnetic radiation. So we see that as the server power in Gospel's HQ increases by 50%, then we also seem to have a 50% or a 50,000 times increase in the radiation levels, given the dialogue from both Sean and MegaMan. And given the final numbers we're given, the server output reaches eventually 600%. It probably goes higher, but that's the last number we're given. And using the basic formula we have, assuming that it progresses linearly, the final wave of radiation is equal to about 550,000 times normal levels. These are the same numbers that I used during the Battle Network Iceberg video we did, because that was one of the entries on there. But the entry itself was, Lan survived a lethal dose of radiation. But according to what you know, and based on you who actually has studied this, how lethal would this actually be?
So since we're not really given a concrete dose of radiation, we'll have to make a lot of assumptions. Background radiation in Japan specifically is about 2.2 millisieverts per year. Annually all over the world, it's averaged to 3, so it gives us two slightly different numbers. So if you break that down, you take either 2.2 or 3, divide that by how many days are in a year, how many hours in a day, you'll get your hourly rate, which is around 0.00025 millisieverts per hour. That is your standard background radiation. So starting at about 50,000 times, you would either, depending on your numbers again, you either get to around 12 or 12.5 or 17 millisieverts per hour at the base that MegaMan says at 50,000 times background radiation.
Yes, and
oh, go ahead.
I was going to say the reason that 50,000 times normal is important is because even though the character sprite does not reflect this, it is said in the story that Lan is wearing a radiation-proof suit, but it will only shield him up to 50,000 times the normal radiation levels. And he got this as part of the story because they noticed that there was about 30,000 times radiation coming off from Gospel's HQ, so they're like, we're not going in there unshielded, so here's this suit. But again, it eventually climbs so high that the suit is basically rendered pointless. So that's the only reason we have that number in the first place. That's why the game keeps throwing the number at us, and that's where we get our baseline from.
I wouldn't say, I think the assumption the game makes right there about the suit becoming pointless, I would not say that. Some shielding is better than no shielding, even if it's not adequate for the amount of radiation you're receiving, it's still going to be better than nothing. So when Sean's cyber suit fails and completely goes away, he is in considerably more danger than Lan, who is shielded up to the exposure of either 17 or 12.5.
Yes, and for context, those who weren't aware, they don't tell you this in the game, but they tell you in the concept art. Sean Obihiro, the leader of Gospel, his Lord Gospel disguise, as he calls his cyber suit, is actually a magnetic shielded robe that is comprised of both the cyber world and real world elements. You know, very sci-fi. But we're assuming that he gave him near-perfect protection until it dropped after the Super Navi base clone was destroyed, and then from there, he no longer has shielding at all, so he is completely unshielded while Lan still has his mag suit. So, yeah, Sean's definitely taking more of this than Lan is, just on the face of it, so...
Yeah, a couple more important factors when it comes to determining how much damage you're going to take from radiation exposure are time and the distance from your radiation source, because radiation operates on the inverse square law. So the further you are away from whatever is producing the radiation, the more that's going to drop off by quite a bit. When you're treating with patients, you're working in terms of centimeters. To how you're calculating this. So that's how much the fall off really is. If you double your distance, you're quartering the amount of radiation you take from whatever source it is. So we don't really know how far away all these characters are from these server walls. We don't really know what the source of the radiation really is, even if it is those server walls that are just kind of spontaneously growing out of the ground. I can tell you, having been in a clinic, I've never seen that happen, even when testing for 15 MeVs, which is millions of volts. I don't know how to calculate for that one, so I'm going to kind of leave distance calculations out of this.
Right. If we wanted to try to fudge something up, we can just take a look at the screenshot, and the model we're given for how tall Lan canonically is reportedly 142.8 centimeters. So that means he is roughly 4'9" in feet. So if we wanted to, we could say that it looks like he is maybe 5 feet away from each wall if we take the character model and like flip it on its side and like try to make an assumption. But he's got two of them. There's like a wall on both sides, and there's like he's in the middle of a radiation sandwich from the looks of things. And Sean looks roughly the same height, maybe a little bit shorter. Again, I don't know how that would actually work, because you said that even in a matter of centimeters, if you increase the distance, it like drastically reduces it.
Yeah.
Okay.
But again, we can assume probably that what MegaMan is giving, the numbers he's giving, are what he's detecting at Lan, because he's holding the PET, so it's
yes.
At Lan.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that. Yeah, that's probably what his sensor is being able to pick up from the sheer exposure.
So we can ignore distance, because we are assuming for. I would say don't ignore distance when you're dealing with radiation, kids. But
this is a hypothetical scenario we're just thinking way too much about. So.
We don't need to really concern ourselves with how distance would affect our calculations, because MegaMan is basically already giving us the answer that would be determined via knowing how far away.
All right, and I'm just going to add this because I'm sure somebody would bring it up if I didn't. At the start of the scenario, when Lan is standing outside the subway, MegaMan looks at the building and he says that he's detecting radiation of 30,000 times normal levels. I can assume that MegaMan does have a scanner for like some kind of range, so he would say that's what's going on inside the building, and it's probably the same here. He's probably just giving Lan the relevant information, because again, Lan's a kid, so he doesn't need all the mathematics. He just needs, what is this going to do to me as I am? He's like, well, you're tanking 100,000 times normal radiation at this point, so this is going to hurt. Your suit is not going to be able to stand up to this. Oh, actually, wait.
So
hold on.
I just thought of something kind of interesting for MegaMan being able to detect the radiation. I wonder what kind of detector he's actually using.
Okay, so given the numbers that we have, and if we're assuming that Lan and Sean are taking all of that directly to the face, with or without shielding, with the numbers we have, Lan can approximately tank 100,000 times normal. So that means he is eating, like, if my math is right, he's basically eating 450,000 times radiation exposure beyond what he can tank. Like, that's what his suit is not defending him from. Again, it's inexact, but what does this mean for him?
You could think about it that way. So if he's taking, let's see, let me do for 450.
Right.
In the low end, that's hitting him with 113 millisieverts, and that is unquestionably dangerous. That's verging in on 0.1 gray. You're gonna start seeing damage. So for acute radiation syndrome, it requires a few things. So if you're going in for a CT, you're never ever going to be in danger of this, because acute radiation syndrome is penetrating radiation to your whole body over a small amount of time. So it is a vast, sudden exposure, and by those rules, you'll start really seeing symptoms of acute radiation syndrome at 0.7 gray. That is roughly the threshold for the first stage of acute radiation syndrome, which is where your bone marrow starts to die from being exposed to too much radiation.
Right.
But at 0.1, that's double the annual dose occupational workers are faced, because the recommended occupational dose to both your eyes and your whole body really is 50 millisieverts a year. Because the thing radiation does when your eyes specifically are exposed to it is you'll develop cataracts, actually. So he might be in danger of, on the low end, he might be in danger of some vision problems later on in life. He's definitely starting to verge onto the not good points, not good levels of radiation. He might be starting to experience some light symptoms of exposure. He won't be passing out. That's much higher doses. That's like 10,000 grays is when you're going to start getting to central nervous system damage from radiation exposure.
Yeah, so the whole thing where both Sean and Lan are electrified and lose consciousness, that was clearly just done for cinematic purposes. It was just done to up the ante and make you think that they're in more danger than they are.
Yeah, they're in danger for sure, but depending on, and that's per hour too, and we're not assuming that will last that whole hour potentially. So he's potentially getting even less than 113 millisieverts.
Yes, I meant to ask, you said in order to contract acute radiation syndrome, you said that it's over a short period of time. How short are we talking here?
A few minutes.
Okay, that actually does seem about right. I didn't bring this up yet, but we're not given an exact time frame of how long this whole interaction, like Lan steps in the room, starts talking to Lord Gospel, until the time when the computer explodes after the Gospel multibug organism is destroyed. I would say this probably, just given how much dialogue there is, and you have to factor in navigating the computer and dealing with both bosses, I would say the time from start to finish is probably roughly about 20 minutes. But the insane radiation spike doesn't take place until, like, the last quarter of that whole interaction. So I would say, just, for simplicity's sake, I think it's probably about maybe 5 minutes from server goes haywire, starts increasing power to 600%, and then in the game, Lan and Sean black out, and then you have to fight Gospel, and then after that, all the servers just shut down because it was eating all their power. So if we're assuming 5 minutes of that just unholy amount of radiation getting sucked into his body, Lan absolutely needs bone marrow transplant at this point? Or is that...
Maybe,
possibly?
If it's so, we assume, let me grab my numbers again. Right. Yeah, let me do it for 17, the world average real quick.
Yes.
It's a 1.6 or 0.165 gray, which is about half of what you normally expect to be the minimum of seeing symptoms of acute radiation syndrome. Because usually it's 0.3 gray is when you're going to start really kind of like going, oh no, I am sick. This is bad. That's when the predominant stages start. Because the way acute radiation syndrome works is you'll have a predominant stage at exposure, which depends very heavily on how much radiation you got. That'll be like, for this level, maybe some nausea, maybe a burning sensation. It definitely would have some gastrointestinal problems too, because the radiation would also start affecting the GI tract, not as quickly as it would affect your bone marrow. That would definitely, you'd definitely be nauseous. You'd definitely have a burning sensation, but you wouldn't really be passing out during a predominant stage. After the predominant stage, there's a latent period where you don't really have any symptoms. That is because while your cells are dividing and all the damage is accumulating, your body is basically acting as normal. But it will eventually, it's like, okay, oops, I can't replace all these cells that are like dying and dividing. What's going on? Oops, all my bones are empty. Uh-oh. And that's when you're going to start getting your hemorrhaging, your blood poisoning part of the thing that actually kills you. That's why you need your bone marrow transplant for the lowest level of radiation syndrome, because your bone marrow is just dead. So you'll need it from someone else, which hilariously, it might actually require you to be dosed with even more radiation, because a thing that you do when you're transplanting bone marrow is you irradiate in order to, like, essentially lower the chance of rejection, lower the chance of your body's immune system picking up that, hey, this is not my bone marrow, help.
Right.
So you might actually get exposed to even more radiation to try and fix this problem. But he's well below acute radiation syndrome, really. He would have symptoms, for sure, but he wouldn't be in danger of dying. Neither which... Actually, this is based on Sean, too, because Sean's getting the... No, right, we're basing this on Lan. Yeah. Sean is in even more danger.
Yeah, I was going to say,
but
this
he's...
is basing on assuming that Lan is completely shielded up to 150k, and then... given the numbers we had earlier, again, the 550k, Lan is just taking the 450k just unshielded. That's just how we're doing this. I'm probably doing this wrong because, again, I'm not a scientist. I don't know this stuff. But that's, again, this is an inexact kind of scenario where I'm just trying to apply some modicum of thinking to it.
The dose difference really isn't going to be that bad if it's blocking some. It's only going to be in the realm of, I say isn't that bad, but it's still a lot. It's only going to be in the realm of, like, 10 or 12 sieverts, really, dose difference between the two of them based on Lan's shielding.
Sieverts or millisieverts?
Millisieverts, my bad.
Okay, just wanted to...
yeah, sieverts. If it was 10 or 12 sieverts, yeah, they're both in trouble. That's way over for... I think that's even over for bone marrow, honestly. You're verging into gastrointestinal failure.
Like, your organs are liquefying at that point.
Yeah,
so... Go ahead.
But yeah, for both of them, it will still be... They'll both experience roughly the same symptoms. Sean's might be slightly more severe, because he's verging in closer to 0.2 gray, rather than Lan's at verging in at around 0.15. So, They'll need medical attention for sure. They will need to inform every doctor that they see post this, hey, I got exposed to a shit ton of radiation. Please advise on how this is going to affect my treatment should any other disease rise. They'll be at a greater risk of stochastic effects later on in their life, like developing some cancers. So another question you posed a while ago is, will this affect Lan's ability to have children?
Yeah, because
and the answer...
it's a plot point that Lan has a son and then carries on the Hikari name. That's canon in the story. So I'm like, if he was exposed to this much radiation, is he sterilized or is he not? So that's what's the verdict on this one?
I don't think he is. The threshold for sterilization via radiation is somewhere around 3 to 5 gray in an adult. I'm sure for children it's different, but there's strangely not research data on, hey, we exposed a bunch of children to radiation to see what the reproductive effects would be.
Yeah, because that's just inhuman, and that's horrible.
That's slightly unethical, but I would assume that is 0.16 to the gonads is not enough to render him unable to have children. I think if he were an adult, he would need to wait while those cells are replenished, because they are very radiosensitive and they would die, but they would be replenished.
Right, and again, he's 11, so he's not even done going through puberty yet, so...
Yeah.
So it's...
It's hard to say one way or another, but I don't think that dose is high enough to cause any problems later on in life. I think it would affect him momentarily, but like I also don't think it would affect him very much because he's 11, so he's not really... It's worse for children because there's just less mass in them, because they're not done growing, some of their systems aren't done developing, so if you hit them weird with radiation, sometimes there can be bad effects. I'm not saying that it's impossible for him to have been rendered unable to have children by this exposure. That is possible, but I don't think it's enough to have guaranteed, like, okay, no more descendants for you, Lan Hikari.
Yeah,
Star Force ends here.
It's not enough to be a concrete, defining moment that this calls it. You know.
Yeah.
But,
no, I don't think that would bring an end to the Hikari line. I don't think it would put him in. It would put him in danger. It would not put him in severe I need a bone transplant danger. It's slightly too low for that. But when you first came to me with this, I thought, man, these are some big numbers. I bet this is really bad. So I thought it was going to be worse. And then when I actually started, like, actually being capable of doing these numbers, over going through this course. I realized there's actually a lot less than I thought it was in terms of how much dose taken, because we also have to account for those numbers, the 160 and the 180 for Lan and Sean are the full hour. If they're only in there for 20 minutes, 5 minutes of that, that's going to be even less exposure. So it's hard to say one way or another. And we also don't really know what type of radiation, other than they said it's electromagnetic.
In the English version, that's what MegaMan says. At the very end, after it's all done, Sean's killed over on the floor, and Lan's like, is he still alive? MegaMan's like, well, he was in the electromagnetic field longer than anybody, so I don't know if he's going to make it. The line was something akin to that. So...
Yeah, when in treatment, rather, we use either photon or electron energies, and electron energies are mostly used for superficial cancers for treatments because they can't penetrate the body that deeply. They're very superficial. So usually, if you're trying to bring an electron treatment to the surface, you'll need like maybe a centimeter of like wet material, we call it a bolus, to trick the beam into treating the very surface of the skin, where the surface is receiving the maximum dose, and it'll keep going on. But it doesn't go very far. So, like, if it's purely, like, just electrons at high energy, there's a chance that it won't penetrate very deeply into either of them. Photons would be much worse. They would get all the way through you. But then, again, we don't really know what energies those are working on. We're just kind of assuming we're taking the background radiation numbers and just directly applying them to these two. And I don't really know either which way on what kind of beam energy we're working on. If it's just the electromagnetic, so it would be akin to being exposed to beta, either minus or positive, or beta plus or beta negative, whatever radiation. It'd be akin to that. And depending on, just the exposure time and how much actual energy is in those beams, if we're assuming that it's similar to beta because it's electron-based, they don't actually really need that much shielding to protect them from all of this. So, because beta, you can't use metal to protect yourself from beta radiation, because beta radiation has a chance to cause something called Bremsstrahlung radiation, which is where the excited beta particles are interacting with the electrons in the metal and causing even more reactions essentially inside. That's a super simplified version of it. So you mostly, when you're shielding for beta radiation, you actually use plastics or waxes, just plexiglass shields or something like that. Something that's less dense, but will still eat all the energy that are in the particles themselves, so you're safe on the other side. So it really will depend on if it is that type of radiation, and that's just something the game does not go into enough detail to really give us a concrete answer.
Yeah, it does not. Again, the closest thing we get is the suits that they're wearing are magnetically shielded, and it's described in one line of dialogue, electromagnetic radiation, but they don't go into any specifics at all. And again, a lot of this is clearly over-dramatized because we got that one guy outside the building who can't walk in a straight line because of all the radiation, but he has been living in this town for who knows how long, so we don't know how long he was exposed. But what I'm taking away from this in terms of Lan and Sean specifically is that Lan is he's got like a very mild case of IQ radiation syndrome, like early stages. He's definitely gonna need
maybe.
Yeah, it's possible.
He's getting close to the lower. I wouldn't call it acute radiation syndrome. I would call it he's a very high exposure, but he's not verging on. He's verging on the very, very lowest end of acute radiation syndrome. He's about halfway there.
Right. And Sean, on the other hand, being completely unshielded, you said he likely does have acute radiation syndrome?
He's about 2/3 of the way there. So he's slightly further along than Lan, but he's not as far as neither of them received the
bone marrow transplant?
The 0.3 grays that would be required to start seeing symptoms of acute radiation syndrome, and then they don't get close to the 0.7 either. So I think they're both safe from acute radiation syndrome. Okay. They're not safe from symptoms, but they are safe from dying.
Alright, so they're not going to die, they're not going to have any life-altering surgery, most likely. Definitely going to be sick for a little while, probably take it easy. Definitely need some medical attention, like go to the doctor, get him to look at you.
Yes.
Just to clear. Alright, so I guess the last one that we need to bring up is, what about Dex? As we know that he did have some minor exposure. The way that the game sets it up, we don't have a time frame for this one either, but let's just say 20 minutes, just to give us a baseline. We see that Lan's friends infiltrated the apartment before Lan did, and they say that Dex spent the most time, working on the servers. So we're assuming that he is, like, right in front of the server. It's pumping out 30,000 times normal levels, and, like, mid-conversation, he just kind of, like, doubles over. He's not, like, knocked out, but he falls to one knee, he's, like, got his hand on his chest, he's coughing a little bit, so it looks like he's got some very mild symptoms, too. So, apparently... At the door?
At the door for 30 minutes if he was just trying to get in. Or for 20 minutes if he was just trying to get in. At 30,000 times the background radiation would put him at around 6 sieverts of exposure. That is... Or 6 millisieverts. 6 millisieverts of exposure. That is 0.006 gray. That's not enough to really... do much to you, honestly. That's not gonna knock you down. That's not gonna you're not I don't even know if you'd notice that.
Right. You said 0.006?
0.006 gray.
Yes. Alright, and bear in mind he's also wearing some, they call it Netopia magwear. It's clearly not as strong as Lan's mag suit, because later on he does like when you got the whole party in the room, he tells everyone, run, you're unshielded, you're not gonna stand up to this. So what we're saying here is that Dex is just kind of being a baby at this point.
I think Dex realizes that he is a side character and does not want to actually fight the horrible monster that's brewing in those servers. He's just like, oh, I'm just gonna fall over. Oh no, Lan, the radiation. I went out like a hero. Blah.
Yeah, because like later he's standing over by the metro line.
He's completely fine.
Completely fine, ready to net battle you with Gutsman, like repeatedly, endless get farmed for battle chips and Zenny afterwards. So he's fine. He just he is in the least amount of danger.
Yeah, I think he's just being a little baby. But that it's significant. It's still significant because like the public dose limits for exposure are very low. But you got to think about it from where we were going from earlier. If we're using background radiation, that's 3 sieverts worldwide per year. So he's still gotten 2 times the dose that he would normally get in a year. But if you think about it like this, like
sieverts or millisieverts?
Millisieverts. I'm so sorry.
No,
millisieverts per year.
Just want to make sure we get the correct, because this is one where I don't want to potentially spread misinformation, by accident.
Right. So he's gotten the equivalent of 2 years dose in 20 minutes. That's significant, medically speaking. Yes. Yeah. And
you also told me that radiation does not go away. Like the amount of radiation you are allowed to be exposed to in your life never
finite. Yes.
Yeah. Like you have a time limit, and they just have had chunks chopped off of it. Again, it's probably not going to affect them in the long run unless they need several medical procedures or they decide to go work at a nuclear power plant. But
the amount of radiation you would need for cancer treatments to actually hit your limit is quite high. It would knock off of that a little bit. He should bring it up with his everyone present should bring up this event to their doctors should they go in for extensive imaging, especially any kind of cancer treatments, because Lan and Sean specifically are going to be higher risk for, like I said, those stochastic effects later on in life. Stochastic effects do not have a threshold, essentially. They just are a thing that could potentially happen. They're hard to measure because it's just is this because of your radiation exposure at that one instant, or is this because of other factors in your life can complicate direct cause and effect when it comes to stochastic effects. So it's just these are just things that you are at a greater risk of given the amount of radiation that you've been exposed to. So for Sean and Lan, they've got some greater risks of some specific kinds of cancers developing later in life. So if that happened, they would have to bring up hey, there was this one time I tried to destroy the world / save the world, and I ate a bunch of radiation. This will affect my treatment, I'm sure. We need to work around this, and then they would need their medical physicist and the dosimetrist to work that into their plans. But yeah, or Scilab could just make up some magic anti-radiation pill or something. I'm sure they've got better radio protectants in MegaMan Battle Network world than we do.
Yeah,
so it's hard to say.
Futuristic world of 20 years ago. Yeah, because when they were designing Battle Network, the world they live in, it was supposed to be modern but slightly futuristic. That was 20 years ago. It kind of reminds me of that one Jetsons joke. We live in the future world of 2002 or something like that. Mm-hmm. From Harvey Birdman.
Oh yeah. Yeah, science in the Mega Man is weird because they seem to apply it very unevenly, because I'm pretty sure we're not anywhere close to being able to encode our dead son into a little avatar and have him actually be like a human person.
Yeah, again, so
in terms of intelligence,
when the world can do that in with computers, electronics, literally digitizing souls at this point, and not just copying like brainwaves to make a personality-based program, then I feel like we have gone well beyond like any kind of realism.
They had soul technology well before Mega Man, because I mean, if you take into account SoulNet being able to like influence people's actions via programs, that was developed by Tadashi and Wily, wasn't it?
That was like 20 years ago. Like,
that was like a while ago. They had that stuff, so they've been messing with like, okay, I figured out how to alter humans beings with like this program I developed worldwide. So yeah, their technological applications are very strange, so I wouldn't put it past them to have some interesting abilities to treat. But in our world, if Lan and Sean were exposed to that, they would need to bring it up. They would have some increased stochastic effects. They would need to bring that up to any medical professionals. They would need to get some treatment immediately after, but they wouldn't be passing out. They'd be fine.
And of course, there's no being completely electrified. Glowing blue from all the radiation. None of that. It's just
no.
that's a little extreme.
The blue glow. That's a different. I know that has a name. Cherenkov radiation. That's it. Cherenkov radiation. If I remember, this is not something I learned in school. This is just something I know off the top of my head. Cherenkov radiation is when the radiation is moving faster than light in a given material, usually like water. That's why you see it in like the underground. If you like look up a video of it, you can see it in like the reactors that are submerged in water. So that blue glow is Cherenkov radiation. If you want to look that up and maybe put an aside into there. Well, but I don't think.
I was gonna say, do you know enough about that to try to run some numbers there? If we assume that it's not just electromagnetic, but it's Cherenkov radiation.
Cherenkov is just like the light. It's still electromagnetic. It's still based on the particles and stuff. Like, it's not a type of radiation. It's just an effect radiation can have on its surroundings, essentially. If it's a high enough energy, that would mean that we've got some very, very high energies for it to be moving faster than light in air.
Right.
I don't know if I don't really know those numbers, but if they were actually experiencing Cherenkov radiation, they both might be dead.
Yeah, what I'm looking at here is it says that the blue glow comes from an underwater nuclear reactor, which that's a different kind of radiation. Yes, I understand that when an atom bomb goes off, there is an electromagnetic pulse, but nuclear radiation and electromagnetic radiation are still two different things, aren't they?
Nuclear radiation would be more particulate than wave. It would have probably some photon as well, honestly. They release a lot of energy just in all forms, really.
Right.
It would probably have some photon energies. It would have some particulate. It would have some, it would have gamma from gamma decay. It would have alpha depending on what's produced. It'd have beta depending on what's produced. Because basically the way decay it works and how it gives off energy is the atoms will lose something depending on what kind of decay is going on. If it's gamma decay is when it just loses energy, so it's not going to lose electrons, protons, or neutrons in it, but it'll just give off some energy from one energy level to another. It'll just get less excited, essentially, is the term for it. For beta, either minus or plus, it's going to give off... Beta is when you either lose a proton or a neutron, they convert into each other. So you're going either up or down on the atomic front when there's either too many neutrons or too many protons. So depending on which one it is, they'll give off a positron or a negatron, which is equivalent to an electron, just with a different charge, essentially. If you want to boil it down really, really, don't science quote me on that. I'm just trying to kind of boil it down. And then alpha decay is when you lose 2 protons and 2 neutrons at once. And it jumps down really far and gives off a lot of radiation. But so it would, for nuclear radiation, it would be particulate probably and gamma. So it would have waves too, because electromagnetic and gamma are the only differences there are gamma waves have a much higher frequency and a much higher energy. So it's all in how the waves are treated or how much energy those waves have. So it would depend, but we can't really say how that applies very well.
No,
to
because
here, for sure.
I am like 99% certain that these servers are not being powered by nuclear energy because, again, it's all computer servers. And the radiation being given off would be more akin to the electromagnets that they were talking about and not straight up nuclear. So, again, it's like...
Yeah, I
feel like that they watched some movie about a radiation fallout kind of thing, and then they just applied what they saw to this. It's like... I feel like the radiation portion of this part of the game was not very well researched or thought out. It's cool. It definitely makes like a cool backdrop for a final boss level, but it's like
narratively.
Yeah, narratively it's cool. It's a great setup,
and
but it's like, yeah, let's not apply real science to this.
Yeah, when you spit out those numbers and it's just like, oh man, background radiation, 50,000 times background radiation, and you just work off of that narratively, that doesn't really matter what the numbers actually are. That's just, you're just ramping up the stakes. It's just a good way to go.
Yeah.
Just because the actual radiation numbers don't really work out to the physical effects that all these characters experience doesn't mean that it takes away from the fact that it's a good device to ramp up tension in your final act over here.
Yeah.
So, like, I don't mind all that much. Like, scientific inaccuracy, as long as it makes a story go vroom, I don't really care.
Yeah, that same can be said for just about any type of game or movie or TV show ever. So when you try to apply too much real world to it, it doesn't always work, and the story just comes apart at the seams. There's this thing called suspension of disbelief, and this is one of those where it's fun, it's a great narrative device, just don't try to apply too much real science to it, because why apply real science in a world where souls can be digitized and there could be so much radiation that a literal building is merging with the internet? Like you see, you open up Google, then all of a sudden you see the top of your house is inside Google.
Yeah, I think the kind of radiation that would start melding the cyber world and the real world would be actually a lot higher than 50,000 times normal background. I think that would be a lot higher. I think that would be at the point where you've turned energy into like soup.
Yeah,
you have melded. Yeah, that would definitely be a much higher, much more dangerous situation for everybody. Present.
Hypothetical scenario: let's say MegaMan's scanners are completely off and he's getting the wrong numbers. So, what kind of radiation levels would it take to actually see? Ignore the blue glow because that's like very specific to a particular type of radiation. But Yai said that she got goosebumps. Like all of her hair stood on end. She got prickles all over. Lan's legs went numb. Both of them passed out. I'm not gonna ask to see like actual electricity shooting off the computers because that's a little excessive. But let's assume MegaMan's scanners are messed up and the actual effects happen to the people. So what types of levels would we actually need to see with this? And how screwed are they afterward?
So I brought this up a little earlier about like the scanner MegaMan has, depending on, because there are a bunch of different types of radiation detection devices that we would use. I would assume for gauging the actual amount like he does, he would have an ion chamber in the PET somewhere, which I don't know why you would put an ion chamber in every single PET that you would make, but I guess. Maybe their science technology is high enough that they can compress that technology down enough to where it can still be accurate to that high a dose of radiation, because there is a point where you're getting too much radiation for your detector, like any given detector, to really accurately gauge. But anyway, that's entirely beside the point. For the physical effects that these characters are experiencing, the numbness and confusion would come from the really high doses that you'd see from acute radiation syndrome. To get to that point from initial exposure and predominant effects very quickly, you would need to be exposed to like 10,000 grays or more. And that's grays, like actual grays, not centigrays or anything like that. That is for our calculations, that would be 10,000 grays to add 3 more digits to that. Basically, that would be like 10 million millisieverts, which is slightly outside of what they're saying they're actually going to see. But at 10,000 gray, that would be when your central nervous system is taking heavy damage from radiation. So your predominant effects will be dizziness and confusion, and you could potentially see some maybe passing out. You cannot survive central nervous system acute radiation syndrome.
So
that is lethal.
So if
100%.
if we're to take this at the narrative face value and not based on the numbers, then Lan and Sean are absolutely dead. They are not walking away from this.
100%. Central nervous system acute radiation syndrome kills you in a matter of days, if not hours. It depends on exactly how much higher than 10,000 you're going, but that is one of those ones with you're surviving a couple days with the best hospital care you can get, essentially, because the thing that generally kills you with CNS, I think, is brain bleeds from just the increased cranial pressure. That'll do you in pretty fast because all those barriers have broken down and you're bleeding into your brain. But yeah, you'll get a latent period of like maybe a couple of hours, give or take, probably less, honestly. So you get really confused. You'll also acute radiation syndrome symptoms pile on because it's just dose thresholds. They're all of them are happening at once for you. It's just the different stages are based on which system of your body fails the fastest and kills you the fastest. So like if you would go over, you're still gonna be like at 10,000 gray, you're still gonna be suffering from the bone marrow one too. All your bone marrow is dead for sure, but it's just not going to kill you as fast as when your brain kind of starts breaking down a little bit and blood starts pumping into there. That intracranial pressure is going to kill you way faster than not having bone marrow anymore.
Right. So in this scenario, let's just follow the narrative here. Lan passes out and he doesn't wake up, effectively. So that means that MegaMan has to fight this Gospel Cyber Beast alone. Might win, might lose, probably loses because Lan's not there. MegaMan is deleted, Sean and MegaMan are dead, and Gospel gets out and just corrupts the entire cyber world with bugs. That's what we're looking at here.
There's another wrinkle here too.
Right.
We're just looking at the amount of damage it's doing to the people in there. That kind of energy would also fry a lot of the electronics that are in there as well. So the gray server might actually melt itself.
Okay, so the multi-bug organism's not going anywhere. It's just the entire server just shuts down. MegaMan and Gospel go down with it, and then Lan and Sean are dead on the floor.
Yeah, it would depend on like what is causing the servers to manifest, what's giving it, like where is it pulling all of that power from and how. Because, like, I am not sure what kind of horrific explosion is required to produce 10,000 gray in a matter of minutes to the entire body. But it's a lot, so I don't know how long a power source running that kind of power could last, depending on, if it can wrap up infinitely. That might be another problem the world might face if a building is constantly pumping out that much radiation. That would be very bad.
All right, so I don't exactly want to use a 1-to-1 comparison because again it's nuclear versus electromagnetic. But is Kotobuki basically now the new Chernobyl, to where it's like completely irradiated, the entire town is inhospitable? Don't go there ever again. Is that what we're?
If that generator is pumping out more than 10,000 grays an hour or in a few minutes to cause, because again that's not 10,000 grays over an hour. That's 10,000 grays over an acute exposure of maybe a couple of minutes or two. So if it's pumping out that much radiation, that's a huge problem. Because the acceptable dose for, like, when you're designing for a hospital and you have a radiation unit, you have to account for how much dose is getting out of the building from all of the things, either your Linux or your high-dose radiation treatments where you actually have an isotope in the building. And that limit is only like 1/40. It's very, very small. I think it's 0.004 is the acceptable outside of the hospital exposure dose from all of the stuff in it. So if it's that bad inside, it's going to be bad outside, and that's going to be quite the large exclusion zone, especially because you can't think of this as like a Chernobyl where it's being caused by the isotopes left behind. This is an active event. This building is an explosion that is still exploding, essentially.
Right. We're assuming that the servers giving off the radiation have not all completely melted yet. It's
yes.
The building itself is one big radiation just giving off like a reactor.
And if it's if the people who are in charge of like hitting the switch and making it pump more and more power, like, are dead because they just got cooked, which is what would happen, and it just keeps going, that could potentially be very, very, very bad. But it's hard to say. Like, there's so many factors, but it is fun to think about. Like, if this was allowed to just keep going for too long. Yeah, that would be a large exclusion zone for sure.
And of course, we're not even taking the whole sci-fi thing of servers literally manifesting into the real world from nowhere because of how high the radiation is. Like, we can't even touch that one because that's literally impossible.
So wait, hold on. But what about if we pull from the manga, what happened when the Psybeast fused and they like got into the real world and fused it together like that and then ate it or tried to? It like broke everything down to the data? Would that happen?
I would say it actually is probably like the reverse process. Yeah, something similar. Like, that's how I tried to justify it, because that was another point on the iceberg, growing servers. How do you manifest something out of nowhere? We see that there's literal parts of the building inside the computer system in the cyber world. They say it's due to all the radiation. So the only way I could possibly justify it is that it's reverse digitization. Like, matter is being brought into the real world from the cyber world, and building new servers to keep the power growing. That's the only possible explanation I could come up with for this. But again,
if you think about that, like the nanomachine problem of like self-replicating nanomachines. So if it's digitizing, if the effect itself is digitizing more things to produce more power, so it's making more servers out of the digital matter essentially, or wave matter if you want to equate it to like Star Force, where they make physical objects out of EM radiation.
Indeed.
Ooh,
that's worse. That's worse in this case.
Yeah, exactly. If it kept going, like, and had no way to like shut it off, it would just keep going. It would just, the whole planet would be, that's a different world-ending scenario for sure than what Sean intended, but...
I know we were already facing, like, natural disasters because in the previous scenario, they're like, yeah, they destroyed our environmental control system, we have to stop freeze man. But with this is like... Oh,
Oops, I just turned the entire planet into the heart of a nuclear explosion.
Yeah, you turn the Earth you turn your building into a giant microwave that cannot be shut off. And now it's just, you're cooking everything inside the ozone layer.
Yeah, rapidly converting everything else into more microwave.
Oh, that's horrifying. No. If we actually had that level of...
That's actually worse. That's actually way worse. I'm glad the servers just shut themselves off. That would have been that would have been a really bummer ending to MegaMan Battle Network 2. You beat the final boss and then like Mega Man goes white because the PET just got fried, and then you cut to an exterior. That'd just be like Arc the Lad 2, where everybody just dies despite the fact that you beat the final boss.
Whew, man, that is awful. So, yay for the power of brotherhood and friendship for being able to make Lan tough it out, because the explosion from the explosion from the Gospel Psybeast destroyed the computer and it shut it all down.
Yeah, thanks, Lan.
Oh man. So
so that supports the Lan being able to do all that, supports the lower level of radiation that was actually seen. But if we took the story seriously on like the physical effects these characters are experiencing, that would have some different other horrifying implications for sure.
Yes, absolutely. Oh man, that got real dark for a minute.
I mean, you started this conversation by asking me, would this kill a child? We were dark at the start.
Yeah, and it only got worse from there. It only got worse.
You asked someone who studied radiation physics and biology a question. That's gonna happen.
Yeah, I think it's kind of funny because it was actually just a little bit over a year that I asked you this. Like, I went back through our messages and I asked you that back in like late August. And then you got
asked
back
me when
to me
I started the program.
Ago. Yeah, that's true. That's true. And then you show up a year later. I have your answer.
Yeah, I learned a lot, and I can now answer.
And I appreciate that, and I appreciate you coming on today to talk about this. So,
oh yeah, I know.
In closing, what we have here is, if we take the numbers we're given, Lan, Sean, and Dex, they're all fine. Just go to the hospital, get yourself checked out, keep it on your medical records. You're not going to be bleeding from the eyes or, any major long-term damage. If we were to take the story at narrative face value, though, the entire Earth is now dead, just based on the amounts of radiation that would require for that. This is like... It's now that scene from T2 Judgment Day, where everything just boom.
Everything is microwaves. Oops.
All microwaves.
They would have some increased risks of things later on in their life, but they would walk away.
Yes.
Fine. And then the worst case scenario of like where these servers do not shut down in any way, shape, or form. They don't gospel exploding does not shut it down, or like it just the process itself is uninterrupted. We are in a gray goo situation where everything has become a microwave.
Right. And as for whether or not Lan gets sterilized, not enough data to work on. It has the potential.
I don't think so.
Yeah, it has the potential to, but it's not the most probable outcome. Is what I'm getting from this.
Yes.
So, Patch, you're still good. Star Force timeline still proceeds as normal, even though Lan's descendants didn't actually play a part till Star Force 4, which got canceled. But all is well. Yeah, at the end of Battle Network 2, it was all just emphasized for.
Yeah, another thing to consider is I don't think his descendants would be affected by this at all, because it would mostly be his somatic cells that got affected by this.
Oh, yeah.
Because he's so young, he wouldn't have any of the germ cells in him that he would use to create a child later on. So, like, depending on which of his somatic cells might pose a problem later, but I doubt that level of radiation would cause any increased risks of anything in his children. He would need to be much older, or whoever would already need to be pregnant with his son to actually see some detrimental effects going forward in his lineage, rather. So I don't think it'll have any effects there either.
Right. So yeah, Lan's future family with Melu and Patch is safe. No damage from the radiation there either. So the timeline stays as it is.
Yeah, I think the timeline's good. I think the effects in the game that we see are a little over exaggerated, but I think the numbers are a significant risk to your health to still have like a detrimental thing happening to you. Maybe not passing out, but that wouldn't be good. That would still be an effective, even if they use like the actual, oh no, I'm being exposed to 150 sieverts. That wouldn't be like, for an audience that doesn't know how sievert, or 150 millisieverts, or that doesn't know how much millisieverts convert and how much you're allowed to be exposed to, that wouldn't be anywhere near as effective as saying, 100,000 times background radiation, 600,000 times background radiation. That would be a much more concrete thing for an audience that hasn't studied radiation physics and radiation biology to latch onto. So I think that's a fair compromise for the narrative to make to ratchet up the tension.
Yeah. Another angle we could look at this from is maybe this is Lan retelling the events and he's exaggerating some of these. He's like, yeah, all the computers started sparking and then, everything just went white, blacked out for a minute. Just to hype himself up a bit. We can speculate, but...
I survived. Yeah. Central nervous system, acute radiation syndrome. Death isn't real, and I'm basically God.
So then here comes...
I see Lan saying that. Yeah, definitely.
Here comes all the Lan's in a coma theories, just like the Ashes in a coma theories.
Oh, no, not again. No, it's fine. Lan's fine. Lan's fine. We did the numbers. He's fine.
Yeah. Yeah, let's go. Let's chill. You can take Melo out to Castillo and get that ice cream later. All's well.
Yeah.
So, thanks for coming on today, and thank you for actually giving us some kind of concrete answer for what would actually happen with this, because I know a lot of people have asked questions about it. I've heard a lot of speculation onto, a lot of people look at these numbers and they're like, yeah, they're basically in the middle of reactor number 4 in Chernobyl when it went nuclear, and I'm like, yeah, that seems a little skeptical. But, thank you for actually bringing us the numbers, and it's good that you already knew the series, so you knew how to apply it to what we were given, so it all worked out in the end.
Yeah, happy to be here, happy to help, and I'm gonna go throw a wrench in your whole plan by saying I am just a student. I haven't graduated my program yet, so, I could be doing this math wrong, but based on my understanding of how background radiation works and all the radiation stuff works, I believe that they're safe. And I've been doing this program for about a year, so if you want to join me in studying radiation physics for about a year and corroborate my findings or disprove me, I'm completely open to that. It'll be a fun learning experience for everybody. Definitely, everybody I've asked has had a lot of fun trying to puzzle this one out with me. So it's just really fun to think about. And if you ask any sufficiently excited physicist or teacher that has any knowledge in this, they will absolutely 100% help you out with calculating these numbers. But yeah.
So he said, be aware he's just a student, not finished yet. Watch him come back next week with something else that changes this entire, hour plus long conversation completely. Found one new thing is the very next lesson he learns when he goes back next week. Just the entire thing's turned on its head now.
P.S. I don't know anything. Help! I did all these math numbers right. No. I think based on what I do know, these numbers that we've come up with are relatively accurate. They were backed up by there's another Let's Play that tried to crunch numbers too. These numbers were a little higher than ours were, but they weren't that far off. So, like, being in the ballpark of those two things, I think this is just a more exact, like, I have taken all the averages and done all the... Because background radiation, also, that value can change over time as well. And so, like, maybe I should have looked up what the background radiation in Japan was 20 years ago, but, you know, that's a conversation for another video, I guess. But, yeah.
You know, we can't go back in time. We can only apply what we know to what we have right now. So that's what we're doing. Well, we could have. I probably actually should have presented that before we even started. That's bad on my part. So if your calculations are wrong, you can blame me for this one. Well,
I'll
again,
take the ball with you.
Well, thank you all for watching. This has been Blade Cross EXE, and hope you'll join us next time whenever we have any random given Mega Man topic that we want to talk about at long form. So thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time. Peace out.
See you next time, guys.